I found an article that is so horrifically stupid it shocks the conscience. Title is Comic Sales Figures Prove to Marvel Diversity Isn't the Problem by Rose Moore, January 2018 on ScreenRants. Strap yourselves in because this is one of the dumbest things you've ever heard. The topic of diversity in comic books is a contentious one, whether it's female-fronted comic titles, gender-bending established characters, ethnicity changes in big screen adaptations, or some other approach to creating a more inclusive comic world. Controversies continue to dog the comic book giants, whether from the white saviorness of Iron Fist, the shocking lack of a female-fronted Marvel movie after 10 years of films, the upskirting of Wonder Woman in Justice Leagues? What the hell are you talking about? The gender bending of legacy heroes like Thor and Wolverine. There have been so many controversies in the past decade that it becomes impossible to list them all. One thing is clear, however, there is some serious debate over whether these controversies even matter or if they represent only a tiny fragment of the comic book fandom. Take a deep breath and a dive into the comment section on any of these topics, and you'll find a huge number of fans who consider efforts to make comics more diverse to be useless pandering, not legitimate changes. Yes. Unfortunately, it seems that the executives at publishers and studios often agree with them because these are publicly traded companies. The goal of the publicly traded companies is a return on investment for the stockholders. You idiot. Do you have mutual funds? You buy stocks? The resistance to female-fronted super movies is well documented, and several newer and more diverse comic titles have been canceled recently as execs claim that the sales just don't support them. Are you calling the executives liars? What's the point of any of the... Does the data actually support the claim that fans don't want diverse comic titles, though? Of course, you idiot. The only thing companies care about is the green paper you put in their hand. If any of this stuff sold, they would be happy to sell it to you. On the surface, it does often seem that the more diverse titles in particular aren't selling. It's because they're not. And that's what really matters to the publishers. But a little more time, look at the numbers and how they relate to the reading habits of the fandom paints a very different picture. If you're looking at the numbers and they're written in red when they should be written in black, then you have a problem. Executives claim fans just don't want diversity. That's a bit of a straw man. It has to be done right. The female Thor is, that's alright. I mean, it could work if it was written by, a normal person, not an SJW. Another thing that doesn't work about the female Thor is that you have a woman who's dying of cancer. That's not escapist fiction. That's real world. Listen, I just got out of the hospital. It sucks. Okay, I don't want to read about someone who's dying of cancer. That's real people die of cancer, not comic book people. Come on. March 2018 solicitations revealed the cancellation of several titles that fit the diverse label, including Gwenpool, Luke Cage, Iceman, written by Scenic Grace, Generation X, and America. In short, almost every title on the chopping block featured female, POC, or LGBT+, don't forget the plus, bigot, leads and or creative teams. Not a great move for Marvel. Of course it's a great move for Marvel. Those weren't selling. That makes it a great move. You cancel the stuff that doesn't... These straight-up cancellations aren't the only casualties either. Jane Foster as Thor is unlikely to live past the spring. As Marvel is teasing the death of the character and the death of the mighty... That's the only comic book hero that people are actually hoping will die. They're cheering her. The death of the mighty Thor. Okay, wait. Thor is a name of the god of thunder? How is Jane Foster named Thor? People don't care about anything. With fans assuming that Thor, the real Thor, so then why is she not just called, whatever, Jane, the god of thunder? Yes, I'm sure the fans of Thor, I never got into it, and I kind of thought the character was overpowered, will retake the title once Jane is no more. Please, Jane, die. X-23 as Wolverine may also be on the way out, or at least maybe losing the Wolverine title as the original Wolverine is coming back to the Marvel Universe. Executives at Marvel have given some conflicting reason for these cancellations and changes, which has raised eyebrows as fans wonder if there is really something so rotten at the publisher that they would intentionally ditch diverse comics. Yeah, they just told you they're not selling. Responding to the backlash over the March, and to be fair, they're not selling because they're in the wrong hands. If you put a gun to Ethan Van Sciver's head and say, hey, dude, we don't want you to draw these comics. We want you to write them. I guarantee sales would triple overnight. Because a funny thing about Ethan Van Sciver is that if you've read his earlier comics from the 90s, he can actually write really well. He's a very, very funny guy, and that comes across in his writing. You can check out some of his comics from the early and mid 90s. He is very funny. Or any of the writers in Comicsgate could make these diverse comics sell. Responding to the backlash over the March 28, Marvel Chief Creative Officer Joe Quesada took to Twitter to try and reassure fans that the cancellations were based purely on sales figures. What else would they be based on? Marvel is very, very filled with NPCs, but they also have to look at the bottom line. If a comic finds an audience, it will stick around, regardless of the lead character or creator's gender, ethnicity, sexual preference, identification. You can claim we're tone deaf, but we publish those books, but you guys ultimately decide what survived. Okay, he's reading in between the line, and he's saying, you asked for these books, but then you didn't buy them. Put your money where your mouth is and buy these books. And they shouldn't buy the books, because books like Iceman, really... the character is not good. You need a non-gay character to write a gay character, or if you want a gay character that sells, then find a Republican gay guy who will write the character for you, because he'll write the character that will appeal across the spectrum. No pun intended. Marvel VP of Sales has also previously claimed that fans just don't want to buy these titles, saying, what we heard was that people didn't want any more diversity. They didn't want female characters out there. I don't know that's really true, but that's what we saw in sales. Okay, that's the bottom line, the sales. His statement was seemingly backed up in a retail. Why would you say it's seemingly backed up? You can look at the quarterly sales reports like anyone else. In a retailer-only panel in New York, where several comic sellers allegedly complained that the newer titles included men kissing men or gender-swapping heroes weren't selling as well as those other titles. No excrement. It's increasingly clear that comic publishers and sellers are starting to believe that diversity doesn't sell. It doesn't. But which figures are they looking at? And are those figures reliable indicators of what fans really... Of course. Yes, the sales are a reliable indicator. What else would you look at? Their dreams? What the hell are you talking about? On the surface, it may seem that the top comic sales back up the idea that diverse titles aren't selling. Yes, you've said this a dozen times. Dynamic Comics distributors' data is most commonly used to see which titles are selling, and their single-issue figures show a trend towards less diverse titles doing well. Okay, you've said a dozen times these comics aren't selling. Overall, in 2017, the top sellers included Marvel Legacy #1, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, Secret, blah, 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 with only one female-fronted title making it to the top 10. Phoenix Resurrection, #1. Month to month, throughout the year, a similar trend emerges. Over the past 12 months, Diamond data shows only and handful? What? Diamond data shows only and handful of diverse titles in the top 10 sellers. It's weird that a publication... Is that a typo? Only and? I don't understand why you... Only a handful or only an handful? But it's not and. Whatever. The Mighty Thor... Okay, Harley Quinn. Yeah, Harley Quinn's a fun character. People can do a lot with her. However, there are two major issues with considering only the top single-issue sellers when making decisions on what fans want to see. First of all, the majority of top-selling comics are always the true heavy hitters. Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men, Justice League, Avengers, etc. Yeah, of course, we know those names. and they've been made into movies. Expecting any newer title with a lesser-known hero at the helm to do as well as these Goliaths is simply unrealistic, and were that the expectation for all titles, a much wider range would be getting the chop. In addition, these sales figures only take into account one thing: single-issue sales. Trades and digital subscribers are not included in this data, and the sales of trade paperbacks paint a very different story. Well, I'm sure you will show us a chart with figures and facts, right? For the year as a whole, the top sellers in trade paperback format are overwhelmingly more diverse titles. 3 of the top sellers are volumes of Saga. Yeah, that is a fun comic. I think Saga went to about 55 issues, and the authors are taking a break. But yeah, the few issues I've read, it's fun. With Paper Girls, but I don't know why Saga is considered diverse. I mean, there's non-human characters. Does that make non-human characters? I mean, one of the protagonists is like a goat human hybrid, kind of a pan character. If you're with Paper Girls and Monsters is also making an appearance. Never heard of those. Of the titles that traditionally sell well in single issue format, only Batman is found on the top 10 list for the year, and only one trade makes it into that list. Throughout the year, trade sales continue to support the idea that diverse comics do well. Appearing in the top 10 every month, Wonder Woman, Captain Phasma, Rat Queens, Harley Quinn, DC Superhero Girls, Paper Girls, Thor. Compared to these single-issue sales, trade paperbacks are killing it. Well, why don't you show us some numbers when it comes to diversity? This isn't a secret either. It has long been accepted that titles like, oh, sweet Lord in heaven, The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl and Miss Marvel, both those comics are absolute cancer. Miss Marvel is worse. At least Squirrel Girl has fun moments, but Miss Marvel is just written by NPCs for NPCs. It should go right into the shredder, which has even made it into the coveted top seller spot and onto the New York Times bestseller list. Find the majority of their success in the form of trade sales. The deeper that we delve into the figures, clearer it becomes diversity sells, but in trade format, not single issues. Well, show me some numbers. The issue with single issues. This is where it gets really, really cringy. The issue with single issues. Publishers and retailers traditionally ignore the sales of trade paperbacks when it comes to deciding whether or not a specific title is doing well. For decades, a single issue has been king, even though those sales figures are far from helpful. Why are they not helpful? For one thing, these sales are based on what a store orders. Okay, pay attention. For one thing, these sales are based on what a store orders rather than what actually leaves the shelves. Interesting. You're saying that shipping is one thing and sales are another. Huh. I wonder. Rather than what actually leaves the shelves. And while comic book retailers have to be capable of predicting what is going to sell, some of the retailer comments at that disastrous panel. Why was it? What makes it disastrous? They're telling you what sells and what doesn't sell. Because it doesn't fit your agenda, you've come to the conclusion that it's disastrous. What's disastrous is comic book shops closing every year. The extremely low sales of Marvel Comics, that's the disaster, not your insane ideology. Suggests that seller bias and prejudice definitely has an impact on orders. I must not have read that right. Some of the retailer comments at the disastrous panel suggest that seller bias and prejudice definitely has an impact on orders. Are you blaming the stores because your garbage tier comics don't sell? That's the only conclusion. Okay, in addition, these figures ignore all the ways that fans read comics if they aren't interested in collecting individual issues. Trade paperbacks are a big part of the comics market, and with digital comic subscriptions, like whatever, gaining in popularity, digital readership is increasingly important and overlooked. Why don't you show me those numbers? Show me those Comixology figures. I'm sure it's a publicly traded company. You can probably look it up. Single-issue comic sales are also falling overall. True enough, because the content sucks, as Peter Simeti has often said. Although Marvel was the top comic book publisher of 2017 with a dollar share of 36%, sales for the publisher have been plummeting because the content sucks. Because of people like you. Sales figures for August revealed 25% drop over the year, prompting lots of concerned think pieces. Yes, even the people at Marvel and DC are starting to wake up to the idea. Even the people, I mentioned Mags has mentioned it, that sales are, she has a picture of her at an empty convention. It's kind of sad, actually. But I mean, it's kind of karma, because people like her who threaten to attack people with a baseball bat are not helping sales. But ignoring the fact that this drop is balanced in part by the increased number of readers purchasing digital copies and trades. Okay, you've mentioned digital copies several times. Show me those figures. Especially, I'm sure she's going to show it in the next panel. Especially trades from sources like bookstores, libraries, and online retailers. Okay, well, how much money are you making from bookstores and libraries? Well, I mean, bookstores, sure. Libraries? Isn't that? I mean, how does a library loan of a book benefit a company? I don't understand what you're trying to say with that. I don't think you understand what you're trying to say. These alternative ways of accessing comics shouldn't be underestimated, especially when it comes to the minority diversity audience. You lost me. If you're not showing me facts and figures for digital sales, then I'm going to assume that those sales aren't good. If you were going to support your argument, you would come up with some hard figures. Despite the fact that there are just as many female comic book fans... Okay, this is the part that your jaw will drop to the floor. Despite the fact that there are just as many female comic book fans as male ones, based on Comic-Con attendance figures and theater audiences, comics are still often seen as a male pursuit. I should have read that at the start of the video, because that level of retardation. She's saying, she reaches the conclusion that there are many female comic book fans as male ones based on Comic-Con. People go to Comic-Cons for fun. They're not... Jesus. Okay. If you're trying to tell me that women are 50% of the comic book purchasing audience, you're out of your mind. Ask any comic book retailer, hey, who comes in and buys our products? What percentage would you say are men and what percentage would you say are women? It's going to be over 90% men are buying comic books. This is just... I'm sorry for using the R word. I know it's offensive, but this is just the dumbest thing I've ever read. Comics are still often seen as a male pursuit because males like comics. And brick and mortar comic book shops are often intimidating places for minority geeks. You're saying women, who are the majority by numbers, are now... They're a mathematical majority, but in your world, women are minority geeks? Oh my God. Larger and more progressive... Oh, Jesus. Stores don't need to be progressive. Stores need to be using black ink, not red ink. They need to be making money. Larger and more progressive stores are welcoming minorities with open arms. But geekdom is filled with stories of minorities being made to feel uncomfortable or unwelcome in a traditional comic book retailer. How comfortable would someone be wearing a MAGA hat, I wonder, in a San Francisco or Los Angeles store? Would they be welcomed? Does your inclusion include those people? I don't have a MAGA hat, but I almost would want one just to go into one of these stores and see what would happen and film it. Because I'm sure I would be, I'm sure I would have a milkshake thrown at me. Comic book stores can also be confusing for newer fans. How? Unlike bookstores and libraries, single issues aren't simply lined up. Okay, now you're just making stuff up. I mean, this is just really... Okay, single issues aren't simply lined up on a shelf in alphabetical order, and finding what they want can be a daunting prospect for newbies. No, it's not. You go in there and say, hey, where's the Iron Man comics? And why is this girl... in the Iron Man comic? Oh, well, because Tony Stark isn't an Iron Man anymore. Why is that? Oh, you're not sexist, are you? Well, no, but I mean, Tony Stark was Iron Man. I mean, I saw the movies, right? Isn't that guy Tony Stark Iron Man? Oh, well, not in the books. It's this teenage girl. Okay, well, what about Thor? That big blonde dude in the movies. Oh, well, actually, it's a woman dying of cancer in a hospital ward. She becomes Thor, and then she never recovers from cancer. It's just we just torture her over and over again, and the Thor powers heal her. Then she goes back to dying of cancer and horrible suffering. Okay, well, I don't want that. What about the green one, the Hulk? Bruce Banner, right? I kind of remember those movies from 2000, early 2000, and as a kid reading the Hulk. What about Bruce Banner? Oh, well, it's this other guy now. Okay, what about Spider-Man? Isn't that Peter Parker or something? No, it's this other guy. Though I've heard that Morales Spider-Man is pretty good, so I'll have to check that one out. Okay, so she's saying that the average adult is having a hard time finding a comic book. That's just nonsense. You go in there and you ask somebody. It's just or you walk around. Comic book stores aren't that big because most of them aren't selling just comic book. They have to sell a bunch of other stuff just to survive. Even if someone is aware of the concept of a pull list, yes, Gail Simone tells us all about pull lists, finding the confidence to ask a surly store... Okay, the store owners are... 99% of them are far left extreme SJW wackos. So now you're saying that the surly store owner about setting up a pull list can simply be too intimidating? Either you don't know what you're talking about, or you do know what you're talking about and you're deliberately lying. Compare that to trades or digital subscriptions, and it's easy to see why many new or minority fans... Okay, minorities are not idiots. This is the soft bigotry of lowered expectations. Minorities have agency. We're adults. We have confidence. Why are you treating us like babies? We're not babies. We've been making purchases our whole life. Please don't do this to us. This is ridiculous. Oh my God. I swear to God, white liberal women are just the worst people on earth. They're so insulting, and they don't know how insulting they are, or they don't care. It's just so patronizing. Anyway, this is pissing me off. Would rather pick up a trade at a bookstore, subscribe to a digital service. It's just easier, and entertainment should involve running a gauntlet. You're talking about a comic book store. You open the door, you walk in. There are books, i.e. graphic novels, and comics, and then there's a bunch of other stuff. What are you talking about? You don't know. For new fans and fans who aren't comfortable in comic book stores, if you're not comfortable in a comic book store, then please get help. Get medication. The more social aspects of single-issue comics, like New Comic Book Day and events... Oh, my God, I can't even read this. Like free comic book days are actually off-putting. Well, you know what? Those free comic books, I think, 99% of them are garbage. Rather than encouraging and carry none of the nostalgia that longtime collectors will associate with picking up a single issue. Oh, okay, this is from Saga. It's, I don't know. I mean, I guess she's brown. Does that make her a person of color? Because she looks like she's from the Mediterranean. And this guy is clearly not human. He's Pan from her Midsummer's Night Dream. So this is... it's a fun comic book, but this is diversity. These are just these people look like 90% of the humans on Earth. I don't understand how this is scores you woke points, but it is a fun comic. Check it out. Despite comic book sales traditionally being more concerned with single issue than trades, it's time for that to change. Trade paperbacks are increasingly important as a marker of what sells. 2016 seen a 12% jump in trade sales. Okay, but what was the total number? You say 12% jump in trade sales over 2015. Okay, what was the total number? I mean, if 12% equals, $1 million when the industry is dealing in the billions, then it's not very much. A period when single issue sales fell. Even 2017 saw both trades and single issue sales fall compared to 2016. Trades were down 9% compared to single issues dropping 10%, with trades seemingly doing better than single issues. Yeah, but what's the volume? What's the total number for each one? With trades seemingly doing better than single issues, comic publishers need to start taking these and digital readers into account when considering whether or not they are taking it into account. They have people with PhDs in economics, mathematics, mathematical modeling, working for them as their accountants. They have the best number crunchers on earth working for them. If this stuff made money, they would be selling it. They're mostly far left SJWs, mostly. They want to sell SJW propaganda. They're bending over backwards to sell it. If it's sold, they would sell it. It's just the market isn't there. Especially when minority readers are potentially more likely to prefer trades over single issues to begin with. Okay, well, just mathematically speaking, you're talking about minority readers. She's using the term minority as racial or ethnicity or something like that. But when you're selling a product to any market, you're concerned with the majority. Who are the majority of your shoppers? If you're talking about the United States, the majority, about 60%, are people who identify as European Americans. Then the next big chunk would be Latin Americans south of the border. And then the last big chunk would be African Americans. Those are your biggest market. It would be Euro Americans. That's who you want to sell to. And then you have, you can have Spanish comics in Spanish. For the anyone south of the border who prefers that. But you sell to who? I mean, you're not selling to Koreans or to Chinese or to Vietnamese or Burmans. I think Burman. I don't know what they are. Because there's just not enough to support a business. That's why you sell to the majority, not the minority. But, never mind. The same data that lends credence to Marvel's executives' statements that readers don't want diversity shows clearly that those readers who prefer trades do want diversity. Yeah, but if trades account for 12% of the market, and then that's not enough to sustain a market. I don't know what the numbers are, but she's not showing us the numbers. So either she doesn't know what the numbers are or the numbers don't favor her argument. This may not be enough to save all the characters and titles that Marvel has been scrapping lately, but it should be enough to give them pause, at the very least stop them canceling titles before the first trade is even released, which happened with Iceman. If you read Iceman, you know it sucks. It's really, really bad. The character is very unlikable. There's no doubt that the comic industry is changing rapidly. Yeah, it's going downhill. And if Marvel wants to keep up, Marvel is the comic industry. They're going to have to balance out the introduction of diverse characters with a new way of looking at comic sales. Dude, there's only black and red ink. Okay, are you making money? No, comic book stores are going out of business every year. Okay, well, we're making it up with digital sales. Then show those numbers. If digital sales are killing the game, then Marvel Comic, which is Disney, owned by Disney. Anyway, it's publicly traded. All those numbers are available online. So if it was selling, they would sell it. One that reflects their more diverse readers and not just the old guard buying through bricks and mortar stores each week. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, just for kicks, I decided to I looked at the writer, Rose Moore. And I went to her. You look up. Okay, Rose Moore has been writing about film, TV, and comics since 2013. Okay, when she began writing for a local print magazine in Vancouver. Okay, you're Canadian then. I mean, so everything. If you're Canadian, I'm not saying they're drunk on maple syrup, but can't trust us Canadians. They're kind of shifty. Since then, Rose has written for Horror Honey's movie pilot and Quirk books, as well as ScreenRants, increasingly focused on comic books, live-action comic adaptations, as well as diversity and representation on screen. Rose co-hosted DC Marvel movie podcasts and has guested on other nerd entertainment podcasts over the past 5 years. Her love of comics began all the way back in the early 90s. I don't believe you. When she discovered the X-Men while living in Africa, where there wasn't a whole lot to do but read, and since then has had an on-again, off-again love affair with not just Marvel, but DC and any comics as well, that means she hasn't been reading comics. I don't believe her. I just don't. You can follow her on Twitter at RoseMoreWrites for tweets about comics, movies, and more. Okay, let's take a look at her Twitter. Okay, checked DuckDuckGo. Never used Google. Rosemore writes, writer for ScreenRant, blah, blah, blah. Red wine drinker. Interesting. Okay, she has a can I focus on this? Random, adorable picture of her. I don't know what that is, a sunflower or something. Okay, what's this? The first picture is of a cat. Oh, I'm sorry, 2 cats and alcohol. I'm not going to log into Instagram, thank you. Okay. So she's a Canadian cat lady. What horrors have you seen? Sweet kitty. Listen, little dude, you deserve better than a fake comic book fan. Oh my God. Don't call me a fake comic. Anyway, adopt, don't shop. Consider a shelter pet today. Anyway, she read the article. It will make you very, very angry. I had a hard time reading that. I got pretty pissed off. Anyway, leave a like and a comment and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Thank you.